So here we are again. We are starting our second cycle. I assume that you're already familiar with our first part, where we talk about idolatry, adultery, bloodshed, and theft, moving from Genesis chapter 1 to Garden of Eden and Abraham and Noah flood. Now we move to the second part. So the first part laid out the foundation. All of you should know the name of God, the story of creation. I take it as a given fact that you are familiar with those terms, and we just continue the path in studying the book of Genesis. And we move now from the story of Abraham that we ended up last time to the story of Jacob. And remember, Abraham was engaged with theft, mainly organized theft, empires, and so on. Now we move from theft to, obviously, to number 5 is justice and civil order. Now, if you look at the Jacob stories, I assume that you are familiar with them. I'll just sum up what the Torah says about Jacob. It presents Jacob in four selected stories of his life, so episodes. Number 1, as it tells us about Jacob struggling against his brother Esau for the birthright. Not for faith, but for birthright. Number 2 was Jacob struggling against the father-in-law Laban, who has cheated him by giving him the wrong bride. Again, it's not for faith or idolatry or any big issue, it's for justice, cheating. The number 3 episode was Jacob struggling again against Laban, but now as his employer. If you remember the story, Jacob accused Laban for not paying him compensation. So it was not for idolatry or the end of the time judgment or a big issue, it's just for money, compensation. He worked for him for nothing. Justice, civil order. Number 4 episode, a struggle against the people of Shechem, if you remember the story. But the story was there that the mayor's son abducted Dinah, Jacob's daughter, and raped her. So Jacob struggled against the right to live in a city, civil right. So the common denominator, as we see from all these episodes, is that Jacob, they all revolve again around the issue of justice and civil order. So first in a family against his brother and father-in-law, and then against the employer for justice compensation. Then as a peaceful citizen to live in the right to live in a city without his daughter being abducted. So he, unlike Abraham and unlike Noah and all the other prophets and so on, he doesn't, Jacob doesn't fight against, for faith, but rather for a civil right and social justice, which happened to be Noahide Commandment number 5. So we move now from Abraham fighting for theft to which is number 4 of Noahide Commandment, to Jacob fighting for justice and order, which is number 5. So this fits the general flow of the story of the book of Genesis, as we mentioned already, that the book of Genesis takes us from one commandment to another in a certain order. We need to pay attention to the order. Chapter 1, the book of Genesis presented Idolatry Commandment. It told us who is God, the God name, how idolatry came to exist in the world. And so what idolatry is, all that we learn from chapter 1. Then we move to story of Eden, where marriage and adultery were introduced through the story of Eden, where God says a man should cling to his wife and leave his mother and father, cleave to his wife, and they become one. That's both marriage, institution of marriage, and adultery at the same word. Then we move the next to story of Cain and Abel, obviously bloodshed, culminating with Noah flood and the bloodshed law in the Rainbow Covenant. We talk about it. So this is number 3. Then the Torah moves on in the story of Genesis and moves to the number 4 commandment of Noah, which is theft. He said Abraham fought against theft. He gave a name, God. He called God a new name, owner, Adonai, and he saw himself as a slave of God and rightful ownership. You cannot steal. Everything belongs to God. All that is the story of Abraham. And next, now after Abraham, we are now in the story of Jacob, which is engaged in civil. It's amazing that people don't pay attention to it, that there is a huge difference between the stories. You can't compare the story of Abraham to the story of Jacob. You never see Jacob thrown to the oven as a martyr and sacrifice his life for God. He's fighting for civil order. And that by itself is amazing because it's actually boring. Usually, people relate justice and civil order not to religion. What is justice and civil order has to do with religion? I understand religion. Tell me about the end of time. Tell me with passion and hallelujah, let me sing and be emotionally stirred. Here we talk about something mundane. To deal with each other rightfully, to seek justice. What does that to do with religion? In fact, this was Rabbi Sachs, the late Rabbi Sachs, who just passed away. He wrote that actually this was one of the greatest innovation of Judaism in the ancient time, because all the gods of the ancient time were actually to them it was important only to they were involved in power struggle, or they wanted to be worshipped, to spread his name over the earth. That's what the God of the time. But no religion, no other religion in ancient time saw God interesting in a dispute between neighbors about the size of the lot, who is right and who is wrong. They never saw God intervening or have any interest in civil order and government. To them, it was outside faith. So this by itself for Judaism is a great innovation that actually which means actually that's what Noahide number 5 means, that God has interest in civil order and justice. And in fact, even today, religion of today, I don't think that the major religion of today, either Christianity or Islam may be more as any interest in civil order or civil dispute. They engage in faith, in something emotional, yes, but nothing so mundane to buy a cow, to sell it rightfully, not to cheat, to get compensation. Well, leave me alone. This is not religion. Yet, most of the Talmud actually is dedicated for justice in daily life, committed only in a market, in a courthouse, in the government, or in a private home. And as you know from the Prophet of Israel, nothing enraged the Prophet of Israel more than injustice, taking advantage of the poor. That's exactly what all of the Prophet of Israel is so enraged about, beside the idolatry. But if you compare the volume, the number of words dedicated for injustice, against shouting against injustice, it overran all the other accusations. That's what enraged Prophet of Israel. And that's by itself is innovation. Another common denominator of all the story of Jacob is that they all revolve, if you pay attention, they all revolve around lying, cheating, and distorting the truth. Jacob cheated his father to get his blessing. Then Laban cheated Jacob by giving him the wrong daughter and by denying Jacob the compensation. Jacob then cheated Laban back and take what he thinks Laban owns him, to get justice, to get even. So then in the city of Shechem, of course, Jacob's son cheat all the citizens, take him to circumcise himself, and then come and kill them all. So they cheat back. The Neo abducted their daughter. Now they pay back what they think the rightful justice. So all those stories of Jacob revolve again around cheating. Now let me ask you, if justice means aspiring to get the truth out, you know, sometimes for families asking for justice, they don't ask for compensation. They will be pleased if just the justice will come out. They come to the court and say, oh, judge, I don't mind how much you punish the guy. All I want is justice to be declared. So if justice means to aspiring to get the truth out and restore damages, of course, how could Jacob use cheating, which is the opposite of justice, to get the truth out? That's a major question that we'll have to deal with. And another question we need to answer is, does all this story of Jacob has any relevance to our time, to our 21st century? So the truth is that we are seeing the destructive impact of false news and lies in our society. It can even affect the presidential election. It has affected our market and our economy. We are all bombarded daily by lies spread intentionally from outside and from inside powers and cyber attacks. They have become the most foremost burning issue of our time. Whether we are at a point we can't tell what is true and what is false. And in history, let me make the point, there is no other nation in the world that suffers so much, so badly from false accusation than the nation of Israel, Jacob. Today, half of humanity falsely accuses Israel for having killed God. The other half falsely accusing Israel for stealing the Torah from what they call Muslims. Both sides, both camps, have already perpetrated terrible false blood libels and other false accusations that prompted the Holocaust. So Israel, if you talk about any nation that suffered from false accusation, here is Jacob himself in history. So go back to the question, how did Jacob's trial and tribulation in life, as told by the Torah, how did it add anything to our understanding of what cheating is and how to seek justice, true justice? And what is Jacob's specific contribution to justice after all these stories? What did he contribute to the notion of justice that Noah didn't know and Abraham didn't know? So, no, those stories didn't come just to tell us stories. Those stories came to tell us that Jacob actually introduced something new in the concept of justice, seeking justice in the world. Let's see what his message is. So, where are me? So from where did Adam and Noah learn the command? Where was it first the commandment number 5 given to mankind? We talk about justice, civil order as Noah number 5. Where exactly in the Torah was it given? As you know, it was given in the Garden of Eden. Where God says to Adam, he commanded on Adam, saying, do not eat from those fruits, because of the day you eat from it, you will die. Now, the Rabbi pay attention, saying that it says, not commanded on Adam, saying that. So they say there are two things here. Yes, he told Adam not to eat from the fruit, but he also commanded on him, he gave him the 6th commandment. The primordial 6th commandment in Eden, they are idolatry, number 1, number 2, adultery, number 3, bloodshed, number 4, theft, number 5, justice and disorder, and number 6, blasphemy. Those 6 commandments, which called Adam primordial commandment, were given to mankind back in Eden, before we lived on earth. Now, clearly, if you look at commandment number 5, justice and civil order, it couldn't be performed in Eden. It has nothing to do with the life in Eden, since justice and civil order require the existence of human society. And there was no human society in Eden. Now, according to the Rambam, in fact, the commandment involved four things. It commands us to establish righteous laws between man and man. Number two, to set up court in every district. Number three, to elect qualified judges. Number four, to establish police. All that could not be done in Eden. It has nothing to do with Eden. So the same is true for all the other commandments that were given to Adam and Eve. Beside the first two. So all the commandments could be violated only on earth. There's only meaning on earth. Beside the first two. What were the first two? If you remember, idolatry and adultery. Those two could be violated in Eden and were relevant to Eden. Idolatry you could violate if you violate God's order, the king's order, and disobeyed his order, and it eats the fruit. That itself called sort of idolatry in Eden. They could commit adultery if the woman, Eve, as a married wife, had she cohabited unlawfully with a serpent, that could consist adultery. Those two commandments could be violated in Eden, and they did. So as it turned out, the humans violated the only two commandments they could violate in Eden, and subsequently they were punished and lost Eden. But here on earth, all the other six were activated. Here on earth, all of the six become relevant. And through this book of Genesis, humanity stumbled from one commandment to the other, from idolatry to adultery, to bloodshed, to all these commandments, step by step, one by one, as we described. So why then they were given in Eden? If they apply only to earth, why civil order and justice was given in Eden as the other? Why not waiting until they would live on earth? The answer is that on earth it would be too late. They came to live on earth already equipped with everything they needed to withstand the challenge of the entire six. God has to prepare them to arrive there, give them all the necessary tools and features that will be able to withstand the challenge on earth. So they had to be prepared in Eden. God built them in Eden and gave them all the necessary psychological makeup and the mindset that would allow them to feel the drive for sin and give them the power to overcome those drive in Eden as a preparation to live on earth. Eden, as we said, is a cradle of mankind. That's where mankind was formed as a preparation to live on earth. So, able to withstand the challenge of justice and civil order, turn out, God implanted in them, even in Eden, the basic understanding of what is right and wrong, and what is fair and unfair, what is just and unjust. This is without which they could not stand the challenge of justice. Now, this fact that man was prepared on Eden to live on earth to face all the challenge of justice, let's explain the observation that puzzled the philosopher of justice all the time. They ask, how is it possible that all humans on earth, around the globe, all civilization, all share the basic notion of justice, what is right and wrong. How is it possible that all the civilizations, Chinese, American, Indian, you name it, they all share the basic notion what is right and wrong? How is it possible? So of course, there are nuances in the perception of those justice between civilizations, but basically they're all the same. So what was the answer of the philosopher like Spinoza, Kant, and Hegel? They call it natural code of morality. They saw those as if our mind is biologically built up with the brain to perceive what natural justice is. So that's how we explain it. But in the eyes of the Torah, this is not just natural feature of the brain. It has come from us from Eden, the cradle of mankind. God has planted this commonality, common sense of what justice is in our brain in Eden. How was it implanted in Eden? I will show you. It is, if you look at the serpent, when he attempted to seduce the woman, okay, he said to her those words, and then how Elohim told you not to touch the fruit? For Elohim knows that the day you eat of it, you will become like Elohim, knowing good and evil. The serpent knew that eating the fruit would render the human the ability to emulate God. You will eat the fruit, you will be like Elohim, meaning you will be able to emulate God, Elohim specifically, the attribute of judgment, meaning you will be able to judge like Elohim, to find the truth like Elohim, to distinguish right from wrong like Elohim. To the serpent, and also judging like Elohim means, if you remember, implementing justice according to the rule of measure for measure. Remember chapter 1, getting even in precise way. In chapter 1, during the 6 days, you remember, when Elohim created the universe alone, awesomely alone, he ruled by the upper hand. He consulted no one. And he with the iron fist, with no mercy, compassion, or forgiveness, under his rule on the 6th day, he allowed creatures to eat because they are being eaten in turn. He allowed creatures to cause pain because the creature themselves will suffer pain in endless cycle of absolute justice, with no mercy. So in the eyes of the serpent, then now we understand now what the serpent meant. When he said, you eat from the fruit, you will become like Elohim. So in the eyes of the serpent, this sort of justice, of Elohim justice, is the highest form of justice that mankind could ever achieve. In the serpent eye, you will be like Elohim. Wow. You will be able to judge, to find the truth, to seek the truth, to bring it out, and to pay retribution with the upper hand. But that's what he meant. But the serpent, of course, was wrong because he saw only half of the truth. In his speech, he failed completely to mention Yud-Heh-Vav-Keh, the merciful attribute. And that makes very sense because the serpent, as a beast of the field, it could never perceive what mercy, compassion, and forgiveness, holiness are. In the serpent eye, only Elohim exists. And he didn't see the other half of the heavenly court. He didn't see that in the heavenly court also sits there the merciful attribute beside Elohim. But the humans were different from the serpent. They were created with a room in their heart capable of perceiving YHVH mercy. So once they ate from the forbidden fruit, their eyes opened and they saw both Elohim and YHVH, which a serpent could never see. So this is why immediately afterward, as they ate from the fruit, what did they do first? Right away, they were aware of their nakedness and they covered it with leaves. Only the awareness of Hashem in your heart and their holiness make you aware and ashamed of nakedness. In the eyes of Elohim, is nothing wrong in going naked because it's natural fact. The verse said that before they ate the fruit, they will walk around naked and unashamed. Now, with the awareness of Hashem, they covered immediately their nakedness. So, from there on, after eating the fruit, even in Eden as well as on earth, all people everywhere, in every civilization, we all share the basic notion of justice that comprises of two wings. One, the wing of Elohim, who seeks justice by seeking the truth and operating by principle of getting even, justice, measure for measure. And beside that, the wing of Hashem, we give us the sense of mercy and compassion and acting compassion above the law, with something that we call consciousness. Every human being, there is no, even the Nazi. Don't tell me the Nazi was a monster. He was a human being, but he suppressed his consciousness. But every human being is conscious about those two things, about the wing of Elohim as well as the wing of Hashem. Otherwise, you cannot call them for trial. All people in all civilization are capable of feeling and operating by those two wings. People in different civilizations differ, however, how much they would allow those attributes to enter the judgment. Some civilization will allow more mercy, some civilization will allow less, but they all feel it. And there is another difference between those two wings. While the law of Elohim, of measure for measure, simple justice, are simple laws and very logical laws, easy to grasp and follow. You do something bad for me, I'll pay you back in the same term. Everybody understands that. Whereas the input of mercy and compassion and forgiveness seem kind of nebulous, undefined consciousness, without clearly writing them down. Nobody wrote down the role of for mercy and forgiveness. The moment you write them down, they become law. So they live with a consciousness to operate. So that's a difference, but every human being feels those two wings since Eden. Now, And another point is that those laws of mercy can be easily pushed away when you face harsh conditions and bad circumstances. Now, let me make the final point here in this part of our discussion. All human societies, from ancient world of Gilgamesh and Hammurabi, through the Middle Ages, through the Greek and the Roman empires, through the Middle Ages, up to the Napoleon and his code of justice, all the laws of justice ever written on mankind, on earth, all system of justice follow the basic wing of Elohim, justice, implemented it according to the rule of measure by measure, for measure, getting even, restoring the damage, living mercy and compassion and forgiveness as consciousness above the law, never in the law itself. The English court system, however, even in the 13th century, recognized, I just make a point here, that the English law recognized a special court set up above the regular court, where people could apply in case the verdict was seen to be inhuman and what they call dishonest. Those, they call it court of equity, they call it. People could apply to this court of equity to overturn the regular court in special cases. But those courts were seen to be operate above the law, never inside the law, and the judges acted out of their consciousness without strict guidelines. By the way, those courts of justice, equity, entered even United States. They were prevalent in 18th, 19th century United States and gradually faded out. So we also had here dual system of regular judges, regular justice, and then just court of equity. It finally faded out, and today you see it only in the state of Delaware. So having now making a short survey on what justice is and how it turned out, how it played out in human history, and let's go back to Jacob and his struggle for justice and see what did he contribute to the justice that his predecessor, Abraham, Noah, and didn't know. What did he contribute to our understanding of justice is, according to Jacob? What is different in Jacob concept of justice that didn't exist anywhere else and still doesn't exist? So let's go now to the story of Jacob. Jacob, as you know, was born into the world that believed in the basic natural justice as seen by the serpent in Eden, namely measure for measure. If people cheat you, cheat them back. If they harm you, harm them back. If they take advantage of you, take advantage of them. Get even. It was a world bereft of human rights, with weak central government, no corrupt judges, and no police. So Jacob would say to him, if you fight for justice, take the law in your own hand and do as much as you can to implement your justice as you understand it. That was the world, unfortunate, that Jacob was born into. We have such world in our days too. Rebecca, Jacob's mother, also grew up in such a society in Haran. And as you know, idolatrous father and brother were known as master cheaters, crooks. who actually also seduced even girls, and has a name in Hebrew implied. Now, Rebecca, therefore, was familiar with the crooked ways of the cheaters, and yet she was different. She was a rose among the thorns, as the rabbi described it. She was righteous, yet her bad background has affected her for the rest of her life. Something was there in her uprising that affected her decision. You see it in her decisions. For instance, when she was pregnant with the non-identical twins who were struggling fiercely in the womb, causing her much agony and pain, Rebecca entered the thought of abortion. She sought to make an abortion. If she remembered her father's home, there were many abortions there. Surely, as Isaac's wife, she must have known from Noah that abortion is forbidden. Yet in despair, she did entertain. After consulting with Noah's son Shem, who lived in Jerusalem nearby, she allowed the pregnancy to come to term. Yet she was punished by heavens for her thought and was never pregnant again. The rabbi said that originally, she was destined to be the mother of the 12th tribe of Israel, but she lost her privilege because of her thoughts. But her background also affected her attitude towards the children. When the twins finally came out at birth, she and Isaac faced an unusual legal puzzle. If you talk about justice and law, here's a puzzle. Unparalleled puzzle in any story in the world. Because the twins came out as one piece. Esau's head came out first, but Jacob followed him suit, holding his heel as if in protest. So they are coming out as one piece. Now tell me who is the firstborn and who is the second one? How can you judge? And actually in the womb, they turn over many times over, one above the other. So who among them is usually the firstborn? So the Torah says that his father, Isaac, and the midwife called Esau arbitrarily. They say, oh, his head came out first. He's the firstborn. But the rabbi said, look at the verse. He called him. She did not. Rebecca did not call him firstborn. She was still puzzled. Who among the twins were really the firstborn? Now this explains why Jacob could have a legitimate claim to be a firstborn in case Esau resented. So that explains how Jacob later on could ask Esau to sell him the firstborn right, as you remember the story, for lentil soup. Now, usually one cannot sell a birthright. It's a fact, it's a natural fact. But if you have a legitimate claim, it can act. It is valid. So, and here the Torah says that Esau accepted the offer. He ate, rose, and went away without protesting. Hence, the sale was final and over, and legitimate. From here on, Jacob is a legitimate firstborn, by definition. They both came out as one piece. Esau gave up, so Jacob entered his shoes. The question is Esau will accept it? So the Torah continues challenging us with another story of Jacob and the famous cheating of his father. So the twins grew up in the same home. It's amazing. The same home, receiving the first love, the first guideline, the first straight teaching, and yet each turned out a completely different person, opposite from each other, as you often see in twins. And that by itself is a challenge of justice, because Esau could say to God, "Oh, you made me like this. Why should I be punished?" And Jacob would say, and he could say, why Jacob should get all the credit where he was born righteous? So that's a big challenge of justice, as you can see. So Esau became a man of the outdoors, involved in a general society and secretly violating all the 7 commandments. Jacob, in contrast, grew up to become a shy boy, secluded in the tents of Torah, learning it with Shem. And with Shem, Jacob learned all the commandments, including justice and civil order. And he learned about the serpent, and it's a sort of justice, Elohim justice, and implemented measure for measure. He learned it from Shem. So, and also he learned from his grandfather, about his grandfather Abraham. If you remember, Abraham acted above the law. He gave donation, he treated people with charity. He built what we call eshel, kitchen, taverns, and hotels for treated the people, the hungry, for free on crossroad. But he did it not as a law, but as an act of mercy and compassion above the law. Nowhere is written that he should do it. So now Esau was exposed to the same treating and training as Jacob, yet he rejected all that and transgressed all the laws, men laws and Elohim law. That's why he was so successful, actually, and people followed him. He concealed his behavior from his father by cheating him, yet he could not cheat the piercing eyes of Rebekah. Nobody can cheat Rebekah. He grew up in such a home. He knew the way of cheating. He could see Esau through. In her eyes, Esau was not qualified to get Abraham's blessing. Jacob did. So Rebekah, hearing that her husband was about to give the blessing to beloved Esau, she decided to take justice on her own hand, as she's used to. She held that if you are cheat back, and take whatever you can as whatever you deserve. If people lie them back. That's what Rebekah believed in. She learned it from Abraham. Abraham too cheated when he concealed, when visited Pharaoh asked him about Sarah. She said she's your sister. He cheated to save her life. Abraham knew that cheating is forbidden inside the court, but outside the world, you can cheat in case you need. So she therefore called now Jacob and instructed him to disguise like Esau, cheat his father, and receive what he deserved, his blessing. Did she act the right way? We just said she followed Abraham, and she said, I need, in case like that, I can cheat and take what I think is just. Now, as the story goes on, I don't want to go into detail. We, as a reader, we see the two sides of the story. We see Esau's side. We cry with him as he cried out when he find out what Jacob cheated him. He cried out so much, and Rabbi said even the angel in heaven cried with him. So we empathize with both. And each one has his own truth. But Esau actually never consented to the cheating, and never gave up pursuing his status, but he wanted to kill Jacob. So Jacob learned the lesson. Although you can achieve justice by cheating and standing on your right, but where is a justice, there is no peace. So this, you learn a lesson. If you seek justice, each side seek its justice without dialogue, without talking to each other, each one without giving up anything, just cheating each one back, you end up with fight. And Jacob was learning this lesson time and again. Now we move on. I don't know how much time we have. I wanted to go to the letter, which is very important story. So now we move to the letter story. So Jacob ran away, and he's desolated. He was robbed earlier on a day by Esau's son. Penniless. He's hungry. He's desolated. No friend. Sun goes down, and he's lie down, desperate on the ground on Mount Moriah, and using stone as a cushion. He remembered now his grandfather tavern and kitchen, and he said, "How I was happy if I had one around me. How happy I would be if somebody copied Abraham and did the same thing, placing place to eat and on a road store. But here is nobody follow Abraham, and he is desperate and fall asleep. And in his sleep, he learned, and actually at that point he is hungry and identify, if you wish, with all the unfortunate people in the world. All the people whose turbulent life has thrown them to the ditches, to those who were robbed and treated badly by society. He feels the same now. He feels what it means to be alone, desolated, hungry, and poor. Then he falls asleep, and in his sleep, he sees the dream, famous dream, that is the most famous dream in all the universe. As the letter still his foot on the ground and his head reaching the sky, the angel of Hashem, or I don't know if I have time to talk about it, to mention the angel of Elohim goes up and down, ascending and descending, and Hashem standing on the ladder. And the place is repeated 3 times before it and 3 times in symmetrical way after it. So again, the angel of Hashem are mentioned 5 times, and 5 times, and Elohim is standing on. I'll show you the slide how it looks like. I don't know if you're allowed to put the slide on. Yeah, let me put the slide. Only somebody need to allow me to put a slide, an important slide. You see it now?
There it is.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you see it upside down or sideways.
It's correct.
It's correct. So you see the letter, the letter. The angel of Elohim are mentioned 5 times. Here there are 5. Each step of the letter presents a commandment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 commandments on and Hashem, you there, okay, standing on it, on the letter. So standing over number 5. 5 is a civil order. So Jacob is on the ground, and you see the letter of 5 steps on the ladder. Each step is a commandment. From on top is a 5th one. Hashem is over it, and since the the word place is repeated 3 times before and after, you see it as a base for the letter. So like Jacob is on the ground, and you see Hashem standing on the ladder over actually number 5, civil order, and Hashem talked to him, and he made a vow. I think I don't have time to. I will stop here, and I will explain this enormous vision of the letter, what it means, and how it changed just because Jacob is making now a vow. In case he come back, he will do something. He will bring Hashem down to the letter. He will introduce her into the justice, into number 5 on top, into the civil order, into our market, into our home. Hashem is not above. Hashem is inside number 5. He says, if I come back, I will make Hashem my Elohim. I will draw back. I will explain it better next time. And that changed the concept of justice in the Torah. Justice in the Torah is not what the serpent means, just Elohim law, but justice in the Torah is what Jacob meant, introducing or drawing Hashem into our world, into the market, into justice, into the court, into the home, into our life. Not in the church, not in singing area, out there in the world, in number 5. So that's what Jacob is pledging. And that changed the Torah. That's what changed the law of the Torah, makes the Torah law different from all the other code of laws in the universe. I'll show you how. And we'll talk about it next time. Okay, I stop here. Any question?